I think it's good for us right now to go through the terms as a review. So we've covered all of this so far except for sentence, and I threw it in at the end because I think it would be a good time to actually define it. A couple of the previous videos at this point, I've used it in my explanations, knowing that I haven't defined it yet, and it might be causing confusion because, like, as a clause, a sentence, what's going on there. So we're focusing on deep grammar. Remember, these videos are to help you teach yourself a foreign language through online tutorials or handheld material or books or videos. Okay, so those are, because there's so many of them out there and so much of a variety. You can get 2 or 3 and use them to explain each other. You can do all sorts of great things. Find the best one that works for you. Just spend hours on YouTube and getting it done. But the trouble is that you really need to learn the language that all languages share, because it's activity that they all share. And I call this deep grammar. Okay, because there's standard rules that every particular language is going to have in its current time. We do things with punctuation now that is changing because of texting, for example. And the capital I, you know how a rule has been for the longest time that you capitalize the first person pronoun. Well, I'm not sure exactly why we do that. I'm very hesitant about the logical basis of that, because we don't capitalize the second person pronoun. We don't capitalize the third person pronoun, if it's in the middle of a sentence. We don't capitalize he all the time. So why in the world am I capitalizing I? When I look at an essay that a student has turned into me and the I is not capitalized, I'm like, that's actually more logical than people think, more consistent with how we treat the other pronouns. However, the standard rule is you capitalize the I. Okay, now that is changing. See what I'm saying? Just give it another 10 years or whatnot. Just as spellings change, N-I-G-H-T, now it's N-I-T-E, it's acceptable. T-H-R-O-U-G-H for through, now it's T-H-R-U, acceptable. So standard rules change over time. And the change is not all that slow. It could happen over 3-5 years, it could happen over 15 years, but they are constantly changing. So if you know the standard rules because somehow you got involved with that and you think you know grammar, you're mistaken. That's not really grammar, okay? So right underneath that is contemporary grammar. And that is also very peculiar to a certain language, okay? So there are rules for learning English that an ESL, English as a second language learner, would need to know that don't necessarily aren't going to pertain to Japanese or French or Russian. They're just things that you're going to have to learn about how we write and speak English, that are beyond the spelling and the punctuation and all of that. You see what I'm saying? The capitalization. So there's always going to be a level of current grammar rules. Those change as well, but they take longer than the standard rules. Okay, they might take 20, 30, 50, or 100 years to change. So for an example, for English, we've lost a lot of inflection. There used to be a lot in there. We've lost a lot, okay? But by the way, Old English is basically unreadable to 99.9% of the English-speaking world. Old English is its own inflected foreign language to us now. Many of us will have a lot of problem with Middle English. Okay, Middle English, the best example would be Chaucer. And if you go in there and you look, well, Chaucer's like early modern actually, but if you go in there and look at it, and yeah, he actually really is more modern, early modern. Middle English is like 50% recognizable to us now, and it's beginning to lose a lot of inflection. So early modern would be Shakespeare, and then modern English would be early modern would be Chaucer, and then modern would be Shakespeare on. Okay, so when we talk about Old English, we are not talking about Shakespeare. Okay, we're not talking about the KJV, King James Version. We don't even recognize Old English because we're so heavily inflected. Okay, and we've lost that. So that's your contemporary grammar change. Now, deep grammar is really stuff that you cannot lose if you are going to communicate effectively through signs from one author to an audience. You're not going to be able to lose this because this is anchored into the way that your existence has been created. You were meant to exist in space and time, okay? And you were meant to have memory, okay? That's the thing that makes these things make you human. You were meant to have displacement. In other words, your mind is able to. That's part of memory, but it's also looking forward to the future, right? You're able to imagine your identity in another place. That's just displacement. Because of that, you can form messages, you can form thoughts about those other places, that past time, that future time, right? The condition of if, then, your mind deals with all of that. So the if then is conditional, right? No, I don't care what language you're in or what era you're in, you're always going to have the conditional, because as soon as you have a language driven mind, you have things like space, time, condition. If you want to study philosophy and go to Hume and Kant, these are the categories they were talking about, right? Aristotle's categories. These things you can't get past them, okay? So they never change. And if you can learn how language works down there, you are going to be able to take it to any language at any time, and walk into that room, if you will, with some tools that will really help you move forward in mastery of that. Okay, so I can't stress that enough. And this is something that is lost, I think, in the study of grammar. We don't recognize that at least 3 layers. When we talk about it with people, it's obvious. You know what I'm saying? But we don't necessarily have it spelled out in the grammar learning material we have. That there is a layer of this that is anchored to the way you exist. And if you're going to learn how human beings communicated with each other, whether it was 2,000 years ago with ancient Hebrew, or 4,000 years ago with ancient Hebrew, or 2,000 years ago with Koine Greek, or now in some provincial region of Spain, you're always going to be dealing with space, time, person, number, gender, simple past, simple tenses, complex tenses, the past, the future. So learning the language of that analysis, right? These are words of analysis. You got this toolbox, and the tools that you're putting in there through these videos, meager and humble these tools are really tools of analysis for any language at any time. So that's what I mean by deep grammar. I'm going to go in and cut this video here because that's probably the deepest concept, the most important concept here, so that you get that, you understand that what's driving all of these videos. Okay, so I'm going to stop it. We'll come back and talk to the others.